We created this event, basically corporate clubs versus community clubs, to see what the differences are and how to sort of market, how we talk about it in the community clubs and in the corporate clubs, and what the differences are. I think we've had quite a few requests from a few area directors that I've been working closely with, like Sharon D'Souza, Cheryl Rankin, Fang, Melanie Pereira. I don't know if she's an area director, but those are the main people who really pushed me hard to get this event going. So thank you to Sharon, Cheryl, Fang, and Melanie. So this event was created on their requests. And I think we want to help quite a number of our clubs in District 86. As we all know, during the pandemic, a lot of corporations either downsized, upsized, moved sideways, forward, backwards, whatever. Lots of things were happening in certain corporations. And certain corporations did very well, but quite a number of organizations are struggling with their membership. And so we made a decision that how we talk to corporate clubs and how we talk to community clubs and what are the differences. To join with me in this panel is today two past international presidents. But before I do that, I would like to recognize our district director, who is Myrna Barth. Myrna, welcome. And if you have a few words for us, Myrna.
Thank you very much, Brahm. I'm seeing that there are a number of people registered here from all districts around the world, which is fantastic. Our two panelists, Pat Johnson and Jim Kakachi, are very well-known individuals, and I welcome them here to District 86 and the presentation that Brahm is going to be putting forward. So thank you all for joining. It's great to see, at this point, 63 individuals and going higher and higher. So Brahm, back to you so that you can conduct this workshop.
Thank you, Myrna. Really appreciate that. So let me just introduce to you first, of course, our past international president, Pat Johnson, who was our international president. And I think I'll get the dates right, 2010-11. Pat Johnson is the owner of Pat Johnson and Associates, where she coaches leaders to help them find the greatest versions of their authentic selves. She works to help individuals overcome their self-limitation and to aspire to more in life. She's also an affiliate and mentor coach at Accomplishment Coaching. That's what she does professionally. Sometimes I wonder whether she's a professional Toastmaster because she was the past international president, but correct me, Pat, but I think you're the regional advisor of this, Region 1? 2. Okay.
2 this year.
2 this year. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we have Pat Johnson, and then we have past international president Jim Kokowski. Jim Kokowski, distinguished Toastmaster, is an entrepreneur and business consultant residing in St. John, New Brunswick, Canada. As a volunteer, he's a member of the board of L'Arche St. John. Of course, that's French, so I wouldn't know how to pronounce that, and I apologize for that, which is part of a worldwide network of communities for people with intellectual disabilities. Jim Kokowski previously worked for 30 years at telecommunications provider Bell Alliance and its related companies. He recently completed a master's degree in business administration at the University of New Brunswick, St. John. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Jim Kokowski. So I will ask Cheryl and Sharon if they can spotlight Jim and Pat so that we can see them on the screen. Okay, I've spotlighted one. Let's see if we can spotlight Jim. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Okay, so we got that technology going. And we're going to talk about corporate clubs versus community clubs. Now, before we go on, I'm going to say that Pat Johnson is an expert on corporate clubs. She wrote this book, and Jim doesn't have a book, so I don't know what he says he's going to be entertaining us today.
Pat wrote the book.
Jim and Pat, welcome. All right. So the very first thing, of course, we want to do is, is that your book, Jim?
No, that's Pat's book.
You have Pat's book as well.
Of course.
Sorry, it was not in focus. So, of course, what is the main difference between a corporate and a community club? And just an overview, a brief overview. So I'll ask Pat to, of course, talk to corporate clubs and Jim to the community clubs. This is how we've set it up. Oh, and if you can, of course, speak to the other as well, it would be okay as well. So we'll start with Pat.
Well, thank you. For me, I define a corporate club as when a corporation decides that they want to have a club for their members or their employees. And so it could be within a corporate world, it could be in government, or it could be a not-for-profit. Any kind of a structure where they want to pay, they want to send their employees. And in many cases, they also provide funding for it and or time for people to attend. So that's how I define corporate versus community. And we have many community clubs, what I call community clubs, that meet in corporate buildings, but are not what I would consider corporate Toastmaster clubs.
Thank you. Okay, so basically it's a club that is in corporations, and we would expect that to be a closed club, would we, or could there be open clubs?
No, I think they turn into community clubs when they open them up. So their controlled environment makes them a corporate club, closed. Yes.
All right. With that, we will turn to Jim. And now, what is a community club, and what distinguishes it to be community?
Sure. Community clubs is really how Toastmasters started way back in 1924 and 1905 was actually when Smedley started. So they are clubs that are created in a community, oddly enough, where people find a group of like-minded individuals who want to get together to practice their communication and leadership skills. So they find like-minded individuals based on time of day, based on location, sometimes by workplace. So we should also mention, there are other type of clubs like niche clubs or people who are in specific professions or have specific aspirations. Of course, there's advanced clubs. So there are other categories, but the broadest would be corporate and broadly community clubs.
And so community clubs would, of course, be open unless they, of course, niche clubs and they require members from a particular segment of the community they are serving. So that would be correct. Yes. Awesome. Okay. So now we know the difference, just an overview difference of its two. What are the similarities between the two clubs? Pat?
Well, I would say there's a great deal of similarity. First of all, the whole curriculum of Toastmasters International is what we bring to whatever audience we have. And so we all work pathways. We all experience leadership and communication by doing it. We all create a safe place to practice, hopefully on a weekly basis or whatever period of time that they choose. And it's, again, based on peer learning feedback, our cornerstones of the program, as well as we're all governed by the policies, the procedures, the bylaws, the protocol, the district administrative bylaws. All of the governing documents of Toastmasters International still governs a club wherever it is, because we are all members of Toastmasters International, regardless of what kind of club we belong to. And I'll leave the ones that I've missed out for Jim.
So to speak to how they're similar?
Yes.
Well,
in your viewpoint, yes. How they're
sure. We've got a structured, self-paced learning program that everybody works their way through, whether in a corporate club or community club. So lots of similarities. Pat's already touched on the differences. Corporate clubs tend to be, or often are funded by the organization, sponsoring organization. Often there's some superseding goals and expectations from the corporation that there always should be, in my view, within the corporation. They are funding that club and the members of tuitions for specific reasons. They want to see development. So you have lots of similarities, but at the core, it's just the same. It's the same program, whether they're in a corporate club, a niche club, or a community club.
Yes.
And I agree with that. And some of the other things that I find is the four core values in the club mission. That is actually the club mission is read at most Toastmasters club, whether it's a corporate club or a community club. What I find is that whether I'm visiting a club in Malaysia and it's a corporate club, or I'm visiting a club in the United States, it's a community club, the basic thing is the same, for sure. And it's our values that keeps us together and so on. Okay. Now, Pat is an expert, I know, on this thing, and I sometimes struggle with it, but I think she's mentioned that in her book very well, is the languaging that we have to use when we're talking about corporate clubs as opposed to community clubs. So, Pat, could you just tell us a little bit about the languaging and the words we use in corporate clubs?
Yes, thanks, Bram, for asking about this. Just so that people understand how I came to this, is that my background, I actually ran learning and development departments within government and corporations. That was my professional career when I was in government and the corporate world. And so I actually hired trainers and contractors to come in to meet the training needs of our hundreds of employees that we had. My team and myself did the training assessment of our staff, and we found out what they needed. And then it was our responsibility within our budget to provide that training, those training needs, to bring in the contractors and the programs that would meet those needs. As a result of sitting in that unique chair, I saw Toastmasters through different eyes. I looked at the Toastmasters program, which I adore, and I've been in for 38 years, and I'm still learning. So I have great respect for this program. I looked at this program from the chair of the person responsible in that world, and I said, I could not in good conscience bring this program into my corporation and be able to be held accountable to my CEO. She wouldn't understand what we were doing with Toastmasters. She wouldn't understand the language we used. She wouldn't understand why we would do something called table topics, or why we would do something from a pathways program. And so I realized quickly that we were responsible. If we were going to sell a product to the corporate world, we had to speak their language. We had to talk about the transferable skills. We had to let them know that table topics was in preparation for interviewing skills. It was preparing them for when they stood in a meeting and had to respond, or when they were called upon at a corporate event to make comments, that they stood up strong and proud and capable and could respond, or when they presented a project and went under questioning by the people in the room. So we needed to provide language. So I talked about tuition rather than paying dues. Dues is very confusing in the corporate worlds and the government worlds where I worked, because dues were seen to be as something you would pay to a professional organization. And we actually had internal policies that forbid the organization to pay. For example, if Jim was a chartered accountant, we would be forbidden as an organization to pay Jim's CA dues for him. He had to pay that and maintain his status, not the corporation where he worked. So that language had to change. And because we're an education organization, it just made sense, and it fit into the organizations where I was, to call it tuition. Now it fit in with every other training program that was happening. I talked about the adult learning principles that are incorporated in Pathways. It was built on adult education principles, where we empower the individual, we acknowledge what they already know, we let them do and experiment, we allow them to give feedback. So much of Toastmasters is brilliantly designed to appeal to the adult learner. And we also built over 300 competencies into pathways. We extrapolated over 300 competencies from the rest of the old traditional program in Toastmasters, looking at all our better speakers, our better club series, all of those, in addition to all of our legacy program. We took those competencies and built them all into pathways. They look different because our audience demanded different. They demanded current and they demanded updated, but we kept the essence of the program. So language, transferable skills, talking about competencies, talking about corporate transferable skills. Another one in terms of impromptu speaking, like table topics is one, but also meeting management is highly in demand in the workplace, as well as, and this is a program, this is an identified training need that I never could identify a trainer for, and that was critical listening skills and critical thinking skills. Very hard to buy on the market, and yet Toastmasters teaches us at every meeting that we're in. We listen critically because we know we're going to give feedback, and we have to think critically what we already know, and to then see what a person could become and then give that feedback so they can take that next step. All very critical transferable skills for the corporate world. So there's a lot of language. I talk about leadership. I talk about communication. I do not talk about public speaking. I never say those two words in that environment at all, because most people that go to work and that might be looking to come to Toastmasters, or their employers sending them, already believe that their people know how to speak in public. They actually speak in the hallways at work. And so they interpret it very literally. So I talk about communication skills because the focus really is listening, then thinking, and then speaking. And it really, the listening part is important in the corporate, because in the corporate or government world, because we have to listen carefully and analyze before we speak. And that helps our career tremendously. If we don't listen, we're not good employers or employees. Mm-hmm. And so some of that language, there's lots of changes of language. I like to call the club officers liaisons rather than VP of membership, because I like to partner with the corporation and change their roles around a bit so that they're not just insulated in the Toastmasters program, but that they're reaching out into the corporate world more. And so I like to refer to them as liaisons and rename them, but that's another whole chapter to talk about. So I'll stop here.
Thank you, Pat. Jim, what's your comeback?
No, I build upon that. I mean, that's an excellent dialogue. And I'll mention, for most Toastmasters, everybody on this Zoom call has grown up in the Toastmasters environment, and we know our internal language, and we really need to move beyond that. So additionally, Pat talked about dues, and we pay dues to clubs. Corporations do not like to pay dues to clubs. They think in golf and curling and those sorts of things do not like that. So this is a very difficult transition to make for us. So anybody who's looking to start a club in a business, or you're talking to a business who may want to send 2 or 3 people to your Toastmasters program, you need to be very conscious of the language you're using. Pat was in training. My main career was in sales and marketing. And sales and marketing is about the generous act of solving someone's problem. Sales and marketing is about listening. It's about listening, as Pat had talked so eloquently about. So if you're going to discover someone's difficulty, the problem they're trying to solve, you need to listen and then speak in their terms about how your service, your product will help them overcome their problem. So that is a difficult transition. And both Pat and I have been on visits to corporations with some Toastmasters who were developing these skills and talking to businesses that were quite awkward, because that's a really difficult transition to make. And a huge part of that is sales is not about talking first. Sales is about asking a question, right? Being quiet, listening, and providing information. Okay, these are your needs. Making notes, understanding what the business's needs are, and how your product or service can help fulfill those needs.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. How we listen and how we speak is very, very important. Now, Pat, you may have said this, but I probably missed it. Or so let's sort of emphasize it a bit, maybe.
Yep.
Now, I've always belonged to a community club, and I've mostly been in community clubs. On a rare occasion, I've been called into corporate clubs, or currently, of course, as a club growth director, I do go into corporations. Like today, we had a presentation at a corporate club where we did a kickoff demo meeting today. But instead of calling it a club, or could we call it a club in a corporation? What would we really call it?
Well, I really, as Jim said, I really listen when I go into the organization, because it's not about us getting it right from the Toastmasters perspective. It's about us taking our curriculum in and adapting it to their environment. Because we have the training for communication and leadership, experiential learning, which is our secret sauce. The fact that they get to practice every week and build skills. What sets us apart is that they don't come in, sit down, get a binder or an online binder, spend 4 hours in a classroom or at their desk studying this and go away with a bunch of knowledge. We give them knowledge, but we give them chance to practice every single week. So we build skills, and as they stumble forward, like I did in Toastmasters, somebody came along, gave me feedback, and helped me to improve. So that experiential learning is so important. And we really need to identify their needs and then enroll them in the Toastmasters program. It's not even sales, is it, Jim? It's not a hard sell. We can enroll them if we know what their needs are. It's like saying, oh, you need a haircut? I've got the best clippers in the world. They're going to go, okay, I'm in. Like, there's no hard sale. People say, oh, I don't do sales. I said, neither do I. I just tell them how Toastmasters will meet their needs and ask them what else they need to know. If we can take away their objections, like when I get into a corporate environment, the first thing I do is ask them, how do you run your training for your people? Do they get trained during their work hours? Do you pay for their training when they go for training? Do they have their training identified in their performance review plans? So that are they held accountable by their supervisor or manager for attending that? If they say yes to all those things, I'm presenting Toastmasters as we'll have it Tuesday afternoon from 2 to 3 every week. We'll send you the bill. How do we bill you? And how are you sending your people to us through their supervisors so that we know what their learning goals are and that we're sending you reports at the corporation so that you can hold your people accountable. When we do things like that, when we find out how they already do their business, all we're doing is bringing curriculum to them that's going to meet their needs. And the unique things about the Toastmasters that we have to tell them is that it is weekly practice. Give us an hour every week if you want to build a skill. If you want to set people up for success, give us an hour a week to practice. Send us your people and hold them accountable. Put a policy in place that says your attendees, because you're paying for them time and money, that you expect them to attend. I don't know, 75, 80% of each of the sessions that are held. Call them training sessions, because don't tell them you're going to have another meeting, because they don't want to go to another meeting. They want to go to a training session. So have sessions every week. so that they can practice, hold people accountable for that attendance. And that means that therefore the Toastmasters organization is going to have to take attendance and send it back to the corporation. But guess what? Your VP or your liaison, your administrative liaison, can be doing that during the meeting, who would otherwise be called your club secretary. But your administrative liaison can take attendance and send that off to whoever's tracking that, if they want it a month, every month, or they want it every 2 months. That administrative liaison can send that off, and that's part of their accountability into the organization. So many things to look at.
That really puts everything upside down for me, listening to you, because I've always been in community clubs. But before we go on, I'd like to tell the audience that the chat is open. Please put your questions there. I know a couple of questions have been posted. I will ask Sharon to sort of start with the top one. But before Sharon, as you are looking at the questions there, let me just look at something that came to my mind. So when people are coming to the meetings, they're training, and it's professional development time, and their professional development is in communication, in leadership, and it's presentations, but not public speaking.
Right now, the boss agree to do it.
Sorry.
You don't know what I'm saying?
Can you please mute yourselves, please?
But that's because agree. It's very good that you don't want to go.
Can we just let's just sort that out a bit? Okay, good. Thank you very much for the mute. And of course, club officers are liaison people rather than officers. And I'm surprised, like 300 competencies from all the material that we have. Incredible. Amazing. So while Sharon is looking at a couple of questions there, Sharon, just spotlight yourself and let me know, or just shout out that there's a question, and we'll just bring on the question. But Jane, what's your point of view there?
This is a great session, and one of the things we need to think about within the businesses, within corporate clubs, community clubs, our stakeholders are our members. We need to take care of our members, and the corporate clubs do. But we need to think a little more broadly that the corporations have got other stakeholders. It's the people who pay the bills, who brought the club in. So Pat talked a bit about how we can send attendance, but I really encourage more and more corporate clubs, the leaders in the corporate clubs, to send quarterly reports or semi-annual reports to say, look, our membership is such and such. These are the people. Here's the pathways they are working on. They're working on innovative planning, presentation mastery, motivational strategies, etc. Because in those businesses, there's managers who are noticing that something's changed in this employee. This employee's better. What happened? And if we've got an opportunity to share that these employees have become part of Toastmasters, that becomes part of the key, right? Oh, okay, that's what happened. They joined Toastmasters. I know about Toastmasters. I didn't know we had a club within the organization, and I know more people who need to participate. So we need to think more broadly about those stakeholders. So as you're setting up these corporate clubs, please instill some sort of discipline to provide some sort of regular feedback, quarterly or semi-annually, to stakeholders that can be shared around.
Thank you.
It's like, just a final comment on that. One of the first things we do and teach our members when we're teaching them how to speak is we say, you have to know your audience. And that's all that we've been talking about for this first half hour, is just knowing our audience. Our audience is different when we go into a corporate world. We must think like our audience. We must think about the person who is sitting in that trainer's chair with all these learning needs assessments for all their hundreds of employees, and they are not going to spend 5 cents, and particularly the training hours, if they can't see value. So the onus is on us representing Toastmasters International to be prepared, to think like a corporation, to come in, be able to do the transferable skills, to talk about the money, talk about the time commitment, talk about how it fits into their already structured organization. We're not there to do it differently. We're there to fit in so that we make it easy for them, and that we do not compromise the value that our program brings. And that is holding our standards, that we require at all times a minimum of 20 to 25 people in this program, or they don't get the benefit of it, because they're there practicing listening skills.
Yes.
And thinking skills. So they need a broad group. And that's where we're maxing our program. And what I know is that I've also contracted as a trainer in corporate and government world. And if I need 16 people for my program, and Jim, you know this as well from experience, if you need 16 people to do the exercises that you're having in your training, and they cannot fill that program, it gets postponed. The contractor doesn't say, oh, I'll do it with 9. No, we don't run it until they are prepared to fill the program.
Yes.
So don't be afraid of what we need to make Toastmasters highly successful in that environment. That's our responsibility as the representative from Toastmasters International and our dynamic program.
We have a hand up. So either you can put a question in the chat or put your hand up. So we have her hand up is Sandra Orland, I believe. No, you don't have your hand up. If you can lower your hand if you are not asking questions, Sandra, that's fine. Thank you very much, Sandra. Sharon, do we have any questions in the chat that we need to answer?
So there were a few questions asking where everyone can purchase Pat Johnson's book. And somebody put in a link there, I believe, so that was answered. But if you have any other resource, any other spot where people can purchase the book, please do let the audience know.
We'll pass that on to Pat.
Okay.
Yes, Toastmasters International does sell my book. So you can order it. It's in their store. And the other thing that I do on a personal basis is I sell bulk to districts. So if districts wanted to buy more than 20 or something like that, then they could order them directly from me and I'd have the printer send them. But basically through Toastmasters is the best place. Yeah.
Thank you.
There is a question from Mary Gibbs. What is the language you suggest using to a corporate club who pays their members dues, but the members will not attend club officer training nor participate in Toastmasters activities outside of their club?
Pat.
Well, it'll be interesting because we probably can do the same thing in a community and a corporate club, Jim. One of the things that I do is when I'm setting up a corporate Toastmasters program or club, I talk about the fact that if you want to be a leader in the program, a leader in training, meaning you want to take on one of the 7 liaison roles, that not all leadership training happens within work hours. And I just give them an illustration of how many times they've sat at home in the evening and read a book because it had leadership concepts in it. And some of our leadership training within Toastmasters happens on the weekends or in the evenings. It's never long. It's 1 or 2 hours, perhaps. There may be optional programs that they would like to go to stay in touch with the worldwide organization where they can see different role models and be exposed to leadership globally. But that I say it's mandatory if they're going to take on a leadership role, that it's mandatory that they show up for the basic leadership training that occurs twice a year. So they're looking at a minimum of 2 or 3 hours, and that they also, that there's an expectation that they participate at an area and a division level, and perhaps even a district level, depending on the mindset of the organization. I have that conversation with them, but people, when they want to be a leader, you can't be a leader by sitting in a group saying, oh, I'm the leader. You have to go and learn things, and you have to step out. You can manage by maybe things you learned at the dinner table at home, but if you want to be a leader, that's about the traits that you have. The rest of it, we learn a lot of management. But if people want to lead the program within the corporation or even in the community, they need to go to training so they know how to do it.
Right.
Pat, here's also a caveat is that, and I think where this question also came from is that a number of clubs, on paper, they look very successful because of the number of members they have. But because the corporation is paying the membership fee, however, the number of people that turn up at the meeting is so low that they are struggling in the meetings. But since the corporation is paying for they're okay, the numbers show up which is good, but the meetings itself, no.
See, for me, it's not a money's issue. It's not a money issue. I say if the corporation wants to pay, great. It's accountability. It's having written it into the performance review plan. It's the supervisor holding the employee responsible for going to training. When I ran learning and development departments, I had to account every month for who showed up and who didn't show up for the training events that we held, because it cost us every time to put that bum in that seat, as we call it in the industry. And so that cost us. We paid for it out of our budget. And if Wendy didn't show up and got a reputation of not showing up for subsequent programs, Wendy didn't get at the top of the list for the next program that came along because she developed a reputation of not showing up and costing the corporation money. And then we also had a practice in the corporation. If Wendy was not in the class and we were notified, say at break time by the facilitator that Wendy wasn't in the class, we called Wendy's supervisor to say, "Where's Wendy?" And they said, "Well, she's in training." And we went, "No, she's not." So now the supervisor has to find out where Wendy is. So not all employees are upfront. And when we hold the supervisors accountable for ensuring that their employees attend the training that they've enrolled them in, and they're holding them accountable through their performance review plan or whatever you call it, then the supervisor's not likely to pull out Wendy from that program to go to another meeting when she's already set a standard that Wendy attend 80% of those training sessions. So now you've got a partnership between the corporation and the employee, that the employee knows that the corporation wants her to attend the training and is going to support her and make sure that she's there and acknowledge her in all likeliness when she achieves something.
But now here, Pat, let me be the devil here. The thing is, that is when the corporation is really interested in the employee and they're really engaged with the employee to do that. Yep. I think, and Sharon here has got, and Sharon Fang and Cheryl, who were really asked me to do this training, I think what they're experiencing is some of the corporations are paying for the membership fee, but they don't really follow through with their performance reviews and whether they're attending the meetings or not. They're not doing that. So that's why the poor results in some of these meetings.
Well, and then let's put it back on the people that are the leaders in the program and say, we're going to report attendance back to the organization every month and make it known to all the people that are there, because there's one of our core values, the first one on the list, is integrity. If you've signed up and you don't show up and your employer thinks you're going, first of all, where are you? Secondly, what's the integrity in that? And so we as Toastmasters, if that's one of our core values, we have to step up and report attendance back to the organization because they're paying us for that person to be there.
Awesome.
There's another element there I'd like to speak to. Yeah. So, we are still developing our skills in working with businesses, with corporations. And I think we should be prepared to have a frank conversation with the stakeholders at the initiation to say, look, here's how your club can fail. The club will deliver tremendous results. Here's some reasons they fail. One, you send conflicting messages to the employees. The employees are trying to determine, does the company still value my participation in the Toastmasters program, or should I be just staying at my desk to lunch? That's one reason it fails. If the assigned leaders don't attend regular training, the club can fail. So you can communicate some of those things and reiterate it in follow-up sessions, but we need to evolve to that stage where we're being frank about, look, you're going to make an investment. It's time. The cost is more time than money for these companies.
Yeah.
But here's the reasons that this investment will fail. You don't want it to fail, do you, Brian?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and then I think if we put this back into the community concept, people come because, well, sometimes they come to a community club because their employer says get to Toastmasters and they don't have enough. In that same way, we deal with it because that we are responsible to find out as a community club, what does that employee need to take back to their employer so that they can stay a member of Toastmasters. Like, we have a brand new member in my community club, and he was sent by his employer. He's a co-op student who's being employed, and he shows up every week because his employer expects him to. His employer paid for him. He's accountable to that. And we're accountable to him because we took his money, saying, we'll provide you with that training. Let us help you. So we've got a deal. We've got a business deal that we're brokering here. And we have to bring integrity of service to that. So I'm hardly passionate about it.
So Sharon and Fang, since the two of you really wanted this, I think this is your core, right? This is where you really are stuck. Something. Go ahead, Sharon.
There are a few other questions that have come in. I'd like to bring them up. One is, Pat, what are the names you use for the other club officers that you call liaison officers? I.e., secretary is what, admin liaison, or what are the names that you have used for each of them?
Yeah. So they're in the book, but if I can think quickly of them, because it's kind of a different line of thinking, but I call the president would be the chief liaison. So my purpose is to use words that wouldn't be used in the corporation. So I don't want to use vice president or, those kinds of things, because that's very confusing in the corporate world and disrespectful in some cases. So chief liaison and that would be the person that would actually report to whoever's sponsoring you. If it's coming out of training department or out of a HR, that person really needs to build that relationship. VP of membership would be education liaison, and their role is very much like the VP of membership. They are scheduling. They need to know what your needs are, what your employer's expectations are, and they really need to be and tracking it along with that admin liaison. Member liaison would be the VP of membership. And here, that person really helps get those new members oriented along with the VP or with the education liaison, but often they've got a big role already. So orientation, getting them involved in pathways, getting them up and going, and talking to talking to whoever's sending the employees, whether it's from HR or training, again, as a group. The treasurer is the finance liaison. And this is a beautiful role because this is great for the number crunchers in the corporation who join, because it's a natural for them. If they want a career in finance, they can become the finance liaison because they work with finance. They find out ahead of time, what do we need from Toastmasters? Do we need an invoice? What do we need? Do we need a purchase order? How does it work? And they make sure that this is paid in advance. They manage new members coming in and all that money transfer. So it's a great role for them to get in and move with the finance people. So those are, I don't know if I've missed any. Did I miss any of the roles?
Like the SAA would be.
Oh, Sergeant at Arms. I call them the operations liaison, and they're the
Wow.
people that are going to just make sure you have a meeting room and all of those things are being looked after as needed. Yeah.
Actually, since you talked about meeting rooms, there is, when we used to meet in person, now we're meeting virtually, of course. One of the issues used to be that the meeting rooms that the club or the corporate club uses regularly would be booked for another meeting, and they had to go looking for another meeting room, and they just have the 1 hour. So by the time they actually get a meeting room, half the time is gone. And then the attendees get a little disillusioned with the disorganization. So that's another challenge.
Well, that's the Sergeant at Arms, the logistics or operational liaison to be doing that.
Yeah.
That should not be happening anyway. Your Sergeant at Arms, if they're called Sergeant at Arms, should be checking that room ahead of time every week. That's just not doing the role. I'll call a spade a spade.
So what I'm getting here is that for those clubs that are struggling, the corporate clubs, and who are not attending, or rooms, for example, are not being allocated, one of the questions I saw was during Toastmasters time, the manager says, no, you got to do this project, or you got to go to this meeting. So they're not able to go to the Toastmasters meeting during corporate time, which means the management sometimes, how do we get back to management? So can you get involved again in the professional development? Because I think management may have sort of drifted and fallen back on, and they're promised to do that. I mean, and therefore they're not expecting any performance reviews. They're not expecting any attendance reports. They're not expecting anything at all, right? So how do we get the management to sort of be back into the game is, I think, the question.
Sure. So just to revisit that conversation, if you're meeting with a corporate club that's not performing well for the members, ask to meet with the club executive and a sponsoring manager or some of the sponsoring managers, and have that conversation. What were the expectations? Ask questions, be quiet. What were the expectations? How are they being met? How can we improve the performance for you? I'd also encourage some of those sponsor managers to visit the club from time to time, to see the environment, understanding that it's delivering value. As you know, someone first attends a Toastmasters meeting, their eyes just go big because it's an amazing environment. So ask them to attend, and either on a planned basis or unplanned basis. Unplanned is better. So find some ways, think about some ways you can reinvigorate it, but don't talk just to the club executive. I would suggest make sure there's some stakeholder managers, because there's managers in the business very likely who want it to succeed. The problem will always persist. There's going to be employees who need improved communication and leadership skills.
Wonderful. Before you go on, Sharon, there was somebody who had their hand up and they put it down because I think it was taking too long. If you can just keep your hand up, and we will come back to you. I know that we only have about 11 minutes more. Officially, we can go a little bit longer if Pat and Jim are willing to stay on. But somebody had their hand up. No, because you put it down. I don't know. You got tired. Okay, Sharon, any next question?
Yes. So people are asking about a template. Do we have a template for a report to present to the corporate executives and learning and development? Is there
a template for what?
I think that relates to what I talked about, sending a quarterly or semi-annual report.
Yes, that's what it is. It's related to what Jim said with respect to reporting. I wanted to know if there was a template that he could use.
I don't have a template, and I simply view this as part of the development of the club leaders. It's like, what do the stakeholders need to know? Don't send them 5 pages. Keep it to a page or two. They like brevity. They tend to like brevity, but just some regular, short, pertinent communication. I would suggest the current people who are members, perhaps some people who left the membership, what paths they're working on. Maybe some external recognition.
Yes, I agree. It's the corporation, like when my very first corporate club that I created this way, I went every 3 months myself. I was the sponsor of the club. I went every 3 months and took a report in my hand, and I met with the vice president. We talked about what was happening, who was excelling, who was doing what, who was raising their hand to be an area director, all those things we had.
Wow.
And they, as a corporation, because they ran projects, they were an IT project company, they had every month a recognition dinner for their staff. And they would acknowledge all the projects that came in on time, on budget, or under. And Toastmasters became part of that recognition. They would call the people up at that monthly event and say, oh, so-and-so completed this in Toastmasters.
Yes.
Because they also made it part of their new hire package. When they hired new people, they said, this is one of the benefits in our organization, and we encourage you. It's here for you, and we encourage you to go. And they also had a rule that when you went into the Toastmasters meeting room, that you must take your work hat off and be a student. You couldn't be the VP. You could not be the director of HR. You must be a student. So it was a great environment to learn.
Wow.
Because the VP got feedback from the frontline receptionist or a project head. So it was all mixed up.
So Pat, that sounds like a tremendous environment. So I would suggest perhaps people should have modest expectations about what people want to receive. So send that email or send that memo, indicate you're willing to meet. Expect it may not happen, but it may well happen that it blossomed into something like that. But the discipline, that's part of the leadership discipline. It's communicating results. And Pat described a fantastic environment, but busy folks might not be as accessible as her BP was. Is that fair, Pat?
Absolutely. And again, you have to go to, I was very fortunate in this circumstance that I had a very strong vice president who was adamant that his people had to be better communicators than the competitive market people that were out there, because it was very competitive. And they were bidding and they were successful because of their communication and listening skills. Their listening and thinking skills. And so they were really bought into the process. And so they did a lot of things that were right. But, one of the things that is really important to always ask for what you want. Take what you get and then deal with the difference. But don't be afraid to ask for what you want. And so in my book, and I know some of you are asking about my book, in my book, I've given a draft towards the back, I've given some resources. I've given a draft of an agreement that I created between my employees and myself as their supervisor who wanted to go to Toastmasters. So I had an agreement that went into their performance review of what I expected them to do. I've given an example of a policy that our government actually created to support employees who wanted to go to Toastmasters, because we have that circumstance in the workplace where the supervisor is really in favor of education and training their staff, and those that aren't. And so we have the haves and have-nots depending on who you work for. And so we created, I wasn't part of it because I had to be excused because of conflict of interest, but our organization developed a policy that gave access to all of our employees consistently to get to Toastmasters, so that they were paid, or they were reimbursed if they met the criteria that their supervisor asked for attendance, and they were given the time, or they could work the time back if they took more than the time allocated, depending on what kind of lunch breaks they got or what time, how much time they got for training. So there was criteria there for that. So there was, I tried to give some examples of things that people might not aware. The biggest thing when we make that transition from community to corporate environment is a real paradigm shift. I encourage people to park what you already know in Toastmasters and start over. Pretend you're walking into the training department and you're now responsible for it, and think like the corporation. Do not think like a Toastmaster. And say, what do I need to have a good contractor? Because that's what Toastmasters is going to be, a contractor for this organization. They're going to get paid money to deliver a product. And these people are not coming to look for friends or find their tribe or have somebody to hang out with. They're looking for professional development skills. And we can deliver that and build our reputation. And when we don't do it, we hurt our reputation and we won't get back in.
I'd like to mention as well, building on that. So I've got a blog, and not promoting the blog, but I did publish this week one on the cost of poor communication. And I've got an article, a link in there from SHRM, Society for Human Resource Professionals. And they've got a similar article, the cost of poor communication. And if you talk to any manager, you say, what's the cost of poor communication? They've got examples. Sometimes it's hard costs, or misunderstandings, or miscommunication, or project delays. There is a cost to poor communication. We are a solution to this.
And so, Jim, if you would post your blog in the chat, that would be fabulous, because that's stuff we need to know when we go into the corporation. We need to have our professional hat on. We need to think like the corporation. If you're not comfortable talking money and time and training in the corporation, don't be the one to do it. Find somebody who's super comfortable doing that and get them to go with you to help you, support you for the first few times and walk you through it. Get somebody to mentor you in it. Because we, as Jim said, this costs them a lot of money, communication.
Yes.
Yeah, and we're a solution.
Aliona has her hand up, and I think she had a few comments in the chat. I don't know how much time we have.
Pardon me, Pat, it's easy to start a corporate club. However, the expectation from a corporation is they expect an instructor-led program. And it's all hunky-dory for the first year. And then later on, the employees feel that they need another instructor-led program. And as a result, corporate clubs tend to diminish during this time. And I feel it hurts our brand at Toastmasters, because it's a really good program for those of us who've been around and love it so much. What is your suggestion in this regard?
Yeah, thank you. That's another element that I really looked at, because for me, it was really critical. My measure of success is that if my CEO is standing in the doorway watching the program at all times, would she see value and continue approving my request to pay for this and for time and money? And what I really suggest is a couple of things on an ongoing basis. I think our area and division directors need to be trained how to support and take and to liaise into those programs, perhaps more. We also have to make sure that they're going to external events so that they bring stuff back to that club, because the corporate clubs often die of boredom and isolation. And that the district make an effort to liaise into those clubs. As well as, I think if you're a sponsor and mentor, that you commit long time to show up on a fairly consistent basis to provide information and encourage them in the very start to invite guests occasionally, not all the time, because you want them doing the program. But the other thing is, and this is a very practical, easy thing to do, and I put an example of an agenda that I would use in a corporate program or corporate club. I have it in the back of my book, because in an hour's program, I would spend 3 minutes, at least 3 minutes for an education time. And it's an assigned role on the agenda, and somebody in that club needs to be bringing an education pertaining to communication or leadership. And so that causes on a regular basis that somebody there is researching something about how to build a better speech or how to do a better evaluation, or showing a tape of somebody or showing a video of something they learned, or bringing a leadership concept that they read. It provides thought every week that's new and unique. You can spend 3 minutes easily talking about where to find topics to speak on, or how to title your presentation, or how to build a great opening, how your closing should look like your opening, how to build transitions. We just go on and on and on. But we can train our people when they get in there to start and look for their own education, and then it keeps it new and fresh. Also, if you create the idea that they generate a theme to their sessions each week, that everything goes on that theme. So for example, if the theme is brilliance, what if the general evaluator that day also instructed their evaluators that they had to use the theme brilliance, so that they not only had that theme for the speakers and table topics, but as evaluators, they had to look at the brilliance of the speakers. Or if it was cloudy days, to take that theme and bring it to their evaluation. How could we clear the clouds, or how could we make things bright? So however they do it, it's causing them to be more innovative, to think differently. And so I think there's little things that we can do to set them up to create more innovative education opportunities every single week in every meeting that they bring, and then more support from the sponsors and mentors on an ongoing basis. The other thing that I am very adamant about is that sponsors and mentors have to stay for a year, because these clubs die because they don't know what to do. And we abandon them before they know how to feed themselves. They don't know what a proxy is. They don't know how to hold elections. They don't know what a district conference is. They don't know. When they get an international proxy, they're going, what's that? I'm not voting for anything. And we abandon them way too soon. We have to stay there way longer, in my opinion, for all new clubs.
Now,
clubs.
For timing, we had said 1 hour, but a flex built in for 1.5 hours, of course. We did say that in our promotion, that we had built in half an hour more. And since we've run over an hour, the half-hour flex is built in. So we are in that half an hour flex now. So I hope we can all stay, because I think the conversation is great. Jim and Pat, you are okay with that?
Sure.
I'm good.
Okay, perfect. We have a question from John.
Thank you very much, Bram. Pat, I think this question is more so for you. I helped charter a corporate club. I came in my background, I had a corporate club in my background as well. You've mentioned in past experiences, as far as getting them involved and saying so-and-so has moved on to becoming an area director. I understand the lure of Toastmasters as far as communication, leadership, and everything else, but I haven't seen a lot of companies get out of that corporate silo of stepping outside of the corporate environment. In case in point, I remember when I was a mentor for a club, and I was there for a year as a mentor, we told the club president, okay, your officer training is coming up this weekend. And they're very much in a corporate silo. Yep. He's like, I'm sorry, it's the weekend. I have a wife and children. I don't have the time to spend outside of my work environment for Toastmasters. So what's the best tact or methodology to get people outside of that 9 to 5 mentality?
Well, if you were in that situation, John, what would you have liked?
In that situation, I told him, I said, listen, you're not special. No one here is special. Toastmasters is an international organization with 300,000 members around the world who have jobs, have families, who work various times, and they are committed to improving themselves. And they understand that commitment steps outside the 9 to 5 mentality, that it may involve weekends, it may involve evenings. So if you're serious about this, you have to get away from, I'm only here for 1 hour during the work week and that's it. That was my paraphrasing of why he should continue on and attend the officer training session.
See, for me, what's really key is that when they were notified of the training, that was months too late. This has to be talked about when the club is in the chartering process. Everything has to go on the table. So when the first thing I'm saying when we're looking for leaders, the liaisons, I'm saying, you understand that if you take on a leadership role, there's mandatory training. It's not optional. It's mandatory because you're saying you're going to lead this group. And there is training that is required, just as there's requirements to keep your professional designation. You must take the training to be a leader in this organization, to take that position of leadership. There's only 7 of them every 6 months. And if you're taking one of those, you must attend the training. So, but that is what I say to the corporation when we're creating this. I talk about there's no pass or fail. This is progress at your own level. Everybody's going to be different that comes in here. So they need to know that there's no pass or fail. That it's each individual at their own pacing, which is unheard of in the corporation. So we need to let them know. I had a manager come to me once and said, Jan's been in Toastmasters for 2 years. Like, does she ever graduate? And I said, not unless she wants to quit. I said, it's just a continual learning process. And they went, oh, okay, now I understand. But they kept waiting for her to graduate and go, are you still going to Toastmasters? Like, how do you graduate from this organization? So we need to let them know those things up front. We need to ask, do your people have access to online materials, or are there firewalls that they have to get exemptions from? That's a basic question nowadays that you have to ask.
Mm-hmm.
So lots of things up front.
So one other thing I've noticed is that usually there are a couple of people or maybe one person who forms the backbone of the club. And due to corporate restructuring or turnover, that person is no longer there. And that's when the club really falls apart. So
that's why we don't make it with the person, we make it with the corporation. The agreement's with the wrong person.
Yeah.
We have an agreement with the corporation, not Pat, who's the employee running around thinking that I'll get all my friends to come to Toastmasters because I'm going to create a Toastmasters in-house. Stop that thinking. It's not your business. You're only bringing the curriculum to deliver it. It's not your job to fill the room. You can do that in your community club. In the corporation, the corporate world sends the people to us. We let them know when there's space. Then we don't have to be running around. We're not running down the hallway. If you were running project management training in company ABC, would they allow you to walk down the hallway and recruit your friends to go to project management? Absolutely not. They would say, who do you think you are? That's not your business. So why do we think that as the outside contractor, the curriculum provider, that we get to recruit the people that go? We don't. It's none of our business. Stay out of their lane. Let them partner with us. Let them send the people that they want to have trained. Hold them accountable to fill the room. And if they can't give you 20 to 25 people, we're not doing business with them because they don't have a big enough need.
Awesome.
Not our job.
So that brings me to this question. It was a question that had been actually sent to me beforehand about, and especially because we are online now and not physical meetings, even in organizations. And of course, as with all Toastmasters Club, whether you're community or corporate, there has been a drop as we went online. So now what is the difference in marketing strategies between community and corporate. But so let's just talk about corporate and how would we be different in marketing and what should they be doing in the organizations to get more people in, as people come and leave, and then how else do they keep going?
You know what? There's an answer for every corporation, and they have the answer. We don't have to have the answer. We have to have the questions. How do they run their training? How do they enroll people? How do they identify the training needs? And let them decide. Tell them that we'll have an intake of new people every 6 months if you want to do it that way with them.
Yeah.
Or are we going to take new people whenever there's a space, or like work with them? We don't have to decide that. They know. And we don't. The main thing we have to do is that our public relations liaison, or our, information liaison person in our club would be the person that keeps current information provided to them. If they're posting on the intranet, if the training, like they advertise their training somehow, that they've got a project management course, enrollment's happening. It'll be starting on February the 15th. And we've got a new intake of Toastmasters for the next year. Closing date will be March 35th. The first 25 people applying will be accepted, or you need your supervisor approval, whatever their way of doing it is. They are doing that, not us. We just provide them with information so that when they start handing information to their employees about the program, or their supervisors and managers, that they've got accurate information. Don't let them make up the information, because they don't know the program. Even if they say, oh, I was a Toastmaster back in the 90s, I got this. I know you don't. I'm sorry. If you haven't been a Toastmaster in the last 3 years, you ain't got it.
I'd like to add too. So think again about the audience, the customer in this case. So in the business world, it's pretty normal. The part of marketing is post-sale service. So reach out to the stakeholder, find a stakeholder. If you don't know who the stakeholder is, ask the club leadership, who's responsible for approving these bills. Send them an email, say, the club's been in place for 6 months now. Love to have a 15-minute conversation about how we're meeting your needs. And that can be really very helpful. And quite frankly, I think you would see that a lot of managers don't give a lot of thought to that Toastmasters organization. A 15-minute conversation could turn into 30 minutes or an hour, and they will think about reinvigorating it. The clubs are always started with great intentions. We need to manage the customer, in this case, the stakeholder, to ensure that that's top of mind, that we continue to deliver value, that they're putting in the necessary effort to make sure that the organization is getting the value from the Toastmasters program.
So, to me, it's getting very crystal clear that people are running around through the hallways trying to sort of recruit people, and they think they are responsible, and it's their club. It's the corporation. There's a stakeholder in the organization that said, yes, we want a club in our organization. Well, a professional development, communication, leadership program in the organization, not a club. I'm getting that. and also, so how are we going to sort of put it into performance reviews and supervisors knowing that this employee is supposed to be going to be training, and it's not your time to get them away from the training into your meetings. It is their training time, it's a professional development time. And to begin with, when we first start out, is our languaging, the language we are using with them, so that it's crystal clear that it is the stakeholder, they're in charge. This is what is called liaison officers. Wow, I learned quite a lot there. Markets, we don't have to worry about it. It's the stakeholder. Use your intranet. Use your whatever you're doing to reach out to the employees. The stakeholder is very, very important. Now, Sharon, it's becoming crystal clear, right? The other day we were like banging our heads, right, together. And now, what do you think, Sharon, now that you are right here?
From an area director's perspective, okay? Yes. And I've heard this from other fellow area directors, where they're having difficulty contacting the leadership of the corporate club. They will just not respond to the emails or phone calls or any form of communication. So the district officers are trying to contact the club to see Are you getting trained? How are your programs coming along? Do you have any issues? But when we don't even get a foothold in, and now with the virtual, I mean, everybody's working from home, so it's really hard to get in touch with their human resources. Sometimes even they are not responsive. And that is the kind of a challenge that some of us have been having. So how do you, even move forward with that?
Well, I think the key is knowing who that stakeholder is or who it's become. That could change over time. So that's sort of, I'll say, corporate knowledge within Toastmasters, within your area, your vision, your district. How do you tap into that and say, who initially contacted us and wanted to get this club started? Who are the managers in the room? Who seems to be signing off on the invoices? So it's that sort of knowledge to reach those stakeholders, to have the conversation. That you say, look, you made the investment 9 months ago. We're having trouble connecting with the club leaders. Can we talk about how we're performing for you, how we're performing, and how we can continue to see more value for your business?
And if we said, and I think that's brilliantly said, Jim, because what that does is address the gap that we've left at the very beginning, that we didn't set it up, that we were going to be in contact. So now we're rebuilding backwards to put something in place that could have been put in place at the very beginning. So going forward, build it all up front. Now you're left with looking, if they're holding training for project management or conflict resolution, they're used to being online. They're doing everything online, like all the rest of us. This is not new. Toastmasters Online is not new. It's old. It's been going on since I was international president. I was creating online clubs in Colorado when I was president in 2010. So this is old in the corporate world. They run their businesses internationally. They're online in different time zones, and they walk into offices where the walls are full of their VP of HR and their VP of training are on monitors. They're not in the room. They're in Colorado and North Dakota and New York and Georgia. Like, that's the business world today. And so don't fall into, oh, this is different or this is hard for them. No, that's our mindset. Go back, if you have to go all the way back, who was the sponsor or the mentor of that club? Find out who they talked to, work backwards, and then get into the current officer and set this up differently. Don't set it up as a community club. Set it up as a corporate partnership where we are the contractor and we have requirements in order for them to benefit from the program that we bring. And that's all we bring, is the program and resources and support to the program.
Thank you. Harold has got his hand up. Sorry.
Oh, Harold.
So, I had another question, but I'm going to jump on this one that Pat is addressing, because you said this a few times. You refer to the contract between we and the corporation. But when the club is formed, in most cases, the we are the staff of the corporation. It's not you and me and Bram and Jim and Sharon. Help me understand that.
No, when we go to the corporate now, we're asking the training department or the HR department to create it, not an individual. We're asking the corporation to sponsor this, and we talk about how they will do that and partner with us.
But the members are still the staff members.
No, well, the members, but they're sent by the corporation, or they request, the employees ask to go to it. Yeah. But there's an accountability inside that corporation. That's what I mean. A paradigm shift. You have to forget what you know about Toastmasters.
Yeah. And the accountability comes from whom to whom?
From Toastmasters International to the corporation, down through their supervisors to their employees, and back up to the organization, ultimately to finance or the CEO, whoever's paying for and letting them go.
Well, Okay.
You know, in any business in the world, there's a manager today saying, "I wish I could get Jim to speak in meetings."
So can I just go to my other question I wanted to ask you? When we join the corporation, when we join the club, the members become, the membership becomes the members of the club, and they use all of these different officers' names. These, I don't want to use the word pseudonyms because they're very good. These liaison names that you talk about. How do you translate that into vice president membership, vice president, and so on? Are they still aware that this is what they are?
Well, they have similar responsibilities, only it looks a bit differently. If we extrapolate these things from the club and the corporate level, it brings a whole responsibility to the district also to provide training for our area and division directors, so they actually understand the corporate environment, so that they go in and they talk the language of the corporations and the corporate setup for the training and the accountability, etc. So that brings a whole responsibility to the district, as well as holding corporate TLIs or corporate training, so that they use the language and actually talk about how to function in the corporate environment. That then becomes a district responsibility. So that's another whole topic to look at, because we have to train our leaders in Toastmasters to provide a different service to the corporation. Once we set them up, then to support them, we have to do a whole bunch of different things to support them. Because if we go in and say, "Oh, where's your VP of membership?" they're going to look at you and go, "What?"
Yeah. I don't want to take up your time. But
they want to go to training that's relevant to the corporate world also. They don't want to sit in training on Saturday and listen to VP of finance or whatever it is.
I started a few corporate clubs, and one of the issues that I always had was that most of them like to go in their training for 1 or 2 days and get it over with, in comparison to us that is continuous. In other words, short term to long term. Can you just address that? You understand what I'm saying? Let's say Toastmasters.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. And we put this on the plate when we talk to the corporation right up front, that this is experiential learning. We come every week to practice a skill. So knowledge and ability, when we work and practice, we build a skill. So communication and leadership is a skill. Communication is a skill that we learn by practicing. We can read a pile of books and have a whole bunch of knowledge, but until we practice it, we don't build any skill. And so that's what makes Toastmasters unique, is that we give people the opportunity to practice. We can send hundreds of people to a 4-hour training on how to do presentation skills, but unless they practice it, they're no better. They go, "Oh yeah, I know I need to have an opening, a body, and conclusion." And 2 weeks later, they've forgotten that they even went to the course.
And business understands that.
Yes, absolutely. Because we know scientifically that within 24 hours, you forget 50% of what you learned if you didn't do a practice. And this is scientific. And so then in a week, you forgot you even took a course. I say to Jim, "Hey, how was that course you took last week?" And Jim would go, "What course?" or vice versa.
We are approaching the time to finish. We have only 6 more minutes. In the chat, I'm putting another link. Please, if you want to listen more to Pat, she'll be by herself. Jim won't be there, unless Jim wants to really join us. But this is on Wednesday at Lunch and Learn from 12 noon on Wednesday, which is January the 19th. The link is in the chat. Click and register yourself if you haven't registered. And Pat will be talking directly, hopefully, we'll get members directly from the corporations who are executive team members and maybe even members, and she will be talking to them. And please do attend, and you may have a question, but we won't have too many question and answers there, perhaps because we'll be talking to the corporate members there. So please do attend, Harold and everybody else. We have one last question before we finish, and that is we have AJ Heron has raised her hand.
Oh, hi, AJ. Hi.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I wanted to raise a new thing that I'm seeing in 2021 and 2022, and that is the rise of what are called employee resource groups. And one of the things that's great about employee resource groups is that many of them want to have a corporate club within the corporation. And then we start pivoting to have the secondary conversation with HR. But the initial funding is actually coming out of employee resource groups. That's something that we did not cover when the book first came out, but I think it's something that we're definitely seeing now. For the corporate clubs that I'm working with, there is a heightened awareness for them to be able to speak to some of the internal issues, so that when you run into situations where people aren't showing up, we actually had the members contact the members to find out what was going on. And sure enough, what we found out was that there was conflict, that the corporation was not able to control its schedule. And once we identified that, then we were able to lift up the Toastmasters activity to be more important because it was an employee resource action. So I wanted to share that. It's wonderful to see you. We're doing great. We hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, AJ Heron. It is now 8:27, so we are finishing now. I know we have a lot more questions actually in the chat that we were not able to get to.
That's true.
But I think we have covered so much material that we need to absorb, and this video will be available. If you have registered, it will be sent to you, and please pass it on to your constituents, your members. It doesn't matter which part of the world you are in. Let's just make sure that we promote this, and let's get Toastmasters organizations, corporate clubs strong again. Thank you very much. Pat and Jim, any last words?
Before you go, sorry, Bram, there were questions regarding community clubs and membership. So maybe that could be another session that we can have.
Definitely. Yes. Jim, would you like to come back to talk
Sure.
about community clubs?
Absolutely.
Okay, there we go. Thank you so much.
Right, Pat, too.
And Pat, yes, I mean, of course, Pat can talk to community clubs, right?
Yep, that's where I go.
We'd love to have that again at some point in time soon.
Just
Any last words of wisdom?
I would just encourage people. I posted my email address in the chat. I know somebody posted an email wanting me to contact them, and I didn't get that because I was too busy talking. So if you would please reach out to me, my email is in the chat. And thank you all for your engagement and your excitement and interest in this important topic. And it's always great to be with Jim and share thoughts in the meeting of minds. Yeah.
Good to see you both.
Let me acknowledge, for a closing comment, Toastmasters about growth, stepping outside the comfort zone. And we've talked about some things tonight that will push you outside your comfort zone. We talked about sending that email to the stakeholder, not the club executive, to the stakeholder. Potentially having a conversation with the stakeholder. That's kind of a cold call. That's going to feel awkward. And that's when you're growing. So we've talked about some things that are going to push you. If you really want to see those clubs start strong, stay strong, and be retained, you've got some good advice tonight on how to nurture those relationships.
Thank you very much, Jim. Before we close, I'll ask Myrna for our last word from our district director, Myrna Barth.
This session has been very informative. It's been very interactive. There's been fun. There has been excitement. There has been so much put out there that I've been writing vigorously. And with this recording, hopefully people will be able to see that. Thank you both for being here and being part of Bram's presentation. Appreciate you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pat and
Thanks,
Jim.
Myrna.
Thank you, Myrna.
Thanks, everyone.
I have, of course, the lunch and learn in the chat. If you want to attend on Wednesday, please register there. Thank you very much, everyone.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
We are adjourned.
Thank you and good night.
Good night.